Someone You Should Know. A program about people you know and even more that you don't. Hosted by Stuart Sax, veteran, husband, father, and grandfather. Now, here's your host, Stuart Sax.
Well, hello again, and welcome to another episode of Someone You Should Know. We're going to be having a discussion today with a gentleman that has probably experienced more in his life than any of us could even dream of experiencing in ours. I think it's going to be touching, it's going to be heartwarming, but hopefully it'll also be uplifting for you. And we are brought to you today by our good friend, the networking diva, and Christine Dean, who is the producer of this program. She's also the sponsor of this program. But more importantly, what Christine does is works with people who want to elevate their website and their marketing experiences to the next level. She can help you do what you need to do in order to improve your presence on the social media and she can do anything and everything. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about because she has done it for us. So if you have any questions about, marketing and your media presence and even podcasting like what we're doing right now, reach out the networking diva, Christine Dean. Thank you very, very much for all you do, Christine. Well, I'm going to get right to it and introduce you to my very special guest, Ricky Sluder. And Ricky, I welcome you to the show. Thank you for taking the time to be with me.
Hey, Stuart, so glad to be here. I appreciate the invitation, my friend.
I very often try to start chronologically and start at the beginning of somebody's life and then move up to what they're doing. In this case, I'm going to kind of do it a little bit in the reverse because you just recently launched it's your first book, isn't it?
Yes.
I believe your first book, and it's called Accepting Truth and Finding Hope. And like a lot of people who do write a book, it is based on experiences. Chefs like to write about the experiences that they've had in the kitchens. People who travel a lot like to write about their experiences. Your experiences have not always been the best. I think that's a fair way of saying it. You had a very challenged childhood. And I'm going to let you talk about it, but all of this has been saved up in your mental Rolodex over the years. And you finally said, I need to share this with people. And so you became a life coach, and you also reach out to people to help them psychologically and spiritually and emotionally to try and make an impact on their identity and their purpose in life. So the book, I'm going to start right with the book. Because of all the experiences that you had in your life and all, what was that defining moment that said, I've got to put this down on paper and I've got to share it with other people?
Stuart, I wish I could take credit, but this was a divine appointment, if you will. God instructed me to write a book, and he gave me 4 words, and I didn't have the first clue what I was supposed to do with it. But I began digging in, and for those of you who may not believe the way I believe, I didn't grow up in church. I'm the last person that you would probably ever think, has conversations with the Almighty. But, there's this little voice that I say is in the head that we sometimes think is our own thoughts, but it's not thoughts we're thinking. I know most of you can probably relate to that, but that's where it came to me. And there's a whole backstory that kind of feeds into that, Stu, but by and large, he gave me 4 words. He told me that I was to go and bear everything about my past, and I didn't want to do it. It was the last thing I wanted to do. It's embarrassing to admit many of the things that I admitted in the book, but it's also the most freeing thing I have ever done in my life.
All right. So now you mentioned 4 key words that were the premise and the basis for this book. Those 4 words are
acceptance, identity, security, and purpose.
And we will mention those frequently through the show, because I think it's important that you maybe expound a little bit about on them individually.
Happy to.
But what you said was that you didn't study to be a journalist, to write books, to be an author, that there was a divine motivation to help you say. And I want to segue into the reasons for you writing this book, but to have that kind of voice, if you will, in your head, or actually probably more in your soul,
Yes.
that's saying, Ricky, you have been through a hell of a lot in your life and all, and it needs to be shared with other people. And that's where you had the emphasis to do it. So I feel for you, my friend, because I read a lot of information about your early days, and they were enough to make anybody want to say, that's it, I've had it, and ended at an early age. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But you had a very, very troubled childhood.
Yeah, do.
And I'd like you to share a little bit about that with the people that are watching and listening.
You bet. So I'll take you back. I'm a 1976 model, so I'm not old, but I'm not young, I guess, right? I'm kind of in that middle ground right now. But about the year 1979, my mom and dad were still married. I had a half sister that I thought was my real sister, but I later learned she wasn't. And we all lived together. We lived in East Texas on a farm, about 13 acres, and grew our own vegetables and fruit trees and livestock and all that stuff. It was kind of an idyllic, if you will, lifestyle for a young boy in Texas, right?
Yep.
And my dad had 2 construction companies at the time. He was a self-made person, I guess you could say. He didn't have a formal education, started work at about 15 years old, and had created something out of nothing. And he did some work for a man. And I want to say that the value of that work was about $90,000. And the guy left my dad hanging, never paid him. And my dad made a difficult decision. One, it ruined him financially, as you might imagine. $90,000, for those of you who don't know, in 1979,
right,
a lot of freaking money. And he was already angry. He had a lot of wounds, like we all do, and hadn't a clue how to manage any of them. And so this was just kind of like the straw that broke that proverbial camel's back for him, and it just sent him into a tailspin. He wanted to murder the guy. At the same time that he's, welling up with all these emotions, he then gets hit by the IRS with a bunch of penalties and stuff. He didn't pay his taxes because he chose to pay his men. In his mind and his heart, he thought, these men that work for me, they didn't do anything to lose their jobs over. And the government will be just fine if I don't pay $30,000 in taxes, but these men won't be. And so he chose to pay his men. The IRS disagreed with them, and they seized everything we owned.
Well, and you at this time, you said you're about 3 years old and witnessing all of this.
Yeah, I'm close to 4 around this time. We left that farm, moved to Ovilla, Texas, which is around Red Oak near Waxahachie, about 30 miles south of Dallas, and ended up in a small home there, no longer on land or anything. And I didn't know why we moved. I'm a little boy, but all of that's in the backdrop. And that as the backdrop, my dad became very violent. I won't speak for him, but my understanding is that he just couldn't get past the idea that he wanted to find this guy and kill him. And he was just a powder keg. You could ask him, how was your day? And he'd lose it and just destroy the whole house. And when I say destroy things, I literally came home from this age of like 4 to about 8 years old, almost 9. I'd come home some days and the wall that separated the living room from the hallway would literally be gone. All the furniture destroyed, glass and wood, broken pieces of furniture everywhere. It looked like a tornado ran through the living room. I watched him tear a recliner in half with his bare hands. I still do not know how he did it, but that's how much rage he was just full of constantly. And as the old adage goes, when you don't have the ability to take it out on the one that you want to, you'll take it out on those you love.
Where was your mother in all of this? Was she that afraid of him also that she didn't actively get involved with trying to find help for his rage?
I don't know what her thinking was on that, Stu, to be real honest with you. I can tell you that my observations was that she was trying to manage it the best she could. She
and shelter you and your sister at the same time.
The best she could, and she didn't have any more education than he. She didn't even know that he didn't pay his taxes. She had no clue of what even transpired. It's just one day everything is gone. We then move. Then he's a violent wreck. You can't talk to him about anything because he'll just lose his mind when you do. So she kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, I think, herself. And she didn't, I don't think, know exactly how to manage it. It's not something that we're taught,
Well, yeah, and also I think for those that are watching and listening to this program, there are some people that are saying, well, why didn't you just get out of that situation? When you're in that situation, it's not always that easy to get out. And also it's also sometimes difficult to recognize that what you see as maybe closer to normal behavior is really abnormal behavior. And there's probably a lot of us that looking back say, gee, I never went through that, but I would be able to do something right away. You can't always say that, because when you're wearing those shoes, you operate differently.
That's 100% correct. It's another adage: you can't see your forest for your trees. And when you're caught up in it, as a little boy, I didn't know that this wasn't normal. I thought every family functioned this way. Now, I was terrified of my dad, literally terrified of him. And for the audience's benefit, I'll kind of give an example of why. I'm probably 7, 8 years old. I'm playing in the living room, and I'm a boy, so I'm being a boy, and I accidentally knocked over a brass horse. That's all I did. It was on an end table, and my dad got very angry, and he told me to go to his closet and pick out a belt that he was going to, teach me a lesson with, if you will. Just the way it was back in the early 80s, Yeah. And so I went to his closet, and I'm a fifth generation Texan, so not a whole lot of good options. Very thick leather belts, conchos, and huge buckles. Okay, we're cowboys in my family, and I picked the one I thought would do the least amount of damage, and I hand it to my dad, trembling, and he takes it, and instead of fashioning it the way you would normally do for a good old fashioned whooping, no, he wraps the tail of it around his hand, and the buckle dropped toward the floor, and he began slamming it into walls and furniture and screaming at the top of his lungs, "Do you think that won't effing hurt you?" And all I could think was, I'm pretty sure it's going to effing kill me. And splinters from the furniture that he was hitting with it were flying in my face, and pieces of sheetrock. And I was paralyzed in fear. I'm 8, I'm a little boy. But that's the kind of, I call it domestic terrorism, that was on display, not quite daily, but close enough.
So what ultimately happened to your father and to the home situation?
He eventually, to his credit, he eventually checked himself into, I think it was like Green Oaks or one of those types of places, to get help. And this is on the heels of me coming home from a baseball game, and I walked down the driveway. I saw his truck, and something shiny caught my eye from under the truck. I looked under there, and he was laying on the ground and had a loaded .44 to his head. I later learned that his intent that night was he was going to murder all of us and kill himself. And by the grace of God, I assume he didn't. I don't know the real reason why he didn't, but I can only say grace of God that he didn't. He then checked himself in, like I said, to get help. And he just left. He just didn't really come back. He made obligatory visits here and there, but it was never relationship based, as I know now as a dad, And so I longed for that relationship, but at the same time, I was terrified of him. I didn't want him around me, but I wanted him to love me. If that makes any sense.
And this is an emotional trauma that you went through when you were, less than a teenager.
My entire formative years. That's the bad thing.
And today when you think about it, those are probably the most important years of a child's life, is when they are, really learning what's right, what's wrong, what paths to take. And when you're thrust into that kind of violence, and followed by abandonment and almost suicide, I mean, this is an awful lot for a child to go through. That would be enough for anybody to say, man, you had a really tough childhood and time as a teenager, but as you got older, the hurdles were not going to stop. They kept popping up in front of you, and you had an incident when you were a teenager that you may share as much as you want with the audience, just again to put them in a frame of mind as to what it's like to be growing up as Ricky Sluder at that time of your life.
Yeah, you bet. So just to kind of give you a little bit of additional background before I get to that story, when my dad left, my mother tells me and my sister, who's 6 years older than I, hey, we're your father and I are going to get divorced. Meanwhile, Stu, during that same time period when my dad was losing his ever-loving mind all the time, another family member molested me, and I was exposed to pornography. So there was a number of things that just kind of all hit at once that would follow me and haunt me for 30, 40 years, honestly. But that aside, my mom tells me we're getting divorced, we're moving to an apartment. And I thought of apartment complexes like what my grandmother lived in. She was on welfare, and I thought, oh my God, like that's going to be horrible. And my mom said, it's a 2-bedroom apartment. Your sister, because she's a girl, will get a room. And then speaking for herself, she said, I'll get a room. And I said, well, what about me? And she said, you'll sleep on the couch. So I slept on the couch in the living room from about 9 years old till about 16, I guess. And none of my toys came with me. I kept my clothes. That was about it. But so that is the backdrop. My mother hadn't worked previously. She was a stay-at-home mom. And so now she has to get a job. She's not, like I said, didn't have a good education. So she got the best job she could, which made her work 2 jobs. And so I was pretty much home by myself. I mean, my sister was much older than me, so she was doing her stuff. I tried to hang around her and her friends. And this new contingent of people that I was around was just a different class of people. So I ended up growing my hair long past my shoulders. I became the classic, late 80s, early 90s thug, smoking a pack a day, drinking at 13 years old. I was probably a clinical alcoholic, really, knowing what I know now. And going to the street races. I mean, I was involved in a lot of bad stuff. And so one night we'd been drinking heavily. So backdrop set. We ran out of booze, and we decided, you know what, we need to go to a pawn shop and pawn a ring so that we can get, some more beer money. So we go to Dallas. It's a bad part of Dallas. I know now after having been a cop there. Horrible part of Dallas. And we park at this pawn shop in an alley. And I'm familiar with enough of gang life at that point that I see this car pull in after my sister and her boyfriend go in the pawn shop. And I recognize them as this Mexican gang. I didn't know which gang they were, but I knew they were a gang. And when my sister and her boyfriend come out of the pawn shop, come back to the car, they all jump them. And it's a knife fight. My sister and her boyfriend didn't have a knife at the time. So it's an unfair fight, but it's on. And my sister was trying to get back to the car to get in, and I was sitting. There was a little Ford, or what people probably know as a Ford Escort, but it was a Mercury Lynx, I think they called it. And I was sitting on the center console. That's what you do when you're a redneck, I guess. And I'm trying to help her by coming across the seat to help her get in the car. And a guy puts a knife to her throat and pulls her back. Another guy puts a knife between my eyes, and he pushes me back up against the driver window. So I'm sitting in the driver's seat, and he's pushing it into the bridge of my nose. I have looked into the eyes of evil a few times in my life, and it's never been paralleled with what I saw in this man. He told me he was going to kill me. I had every reason to believe he was going to. And I ended up bargaining for my life with my, what I tend to say is that later I would become a hostage negotiator. And I guess I channeled what God was going to give me later at 14 years old, because I talked him out of killing me, and I ended up surrendering to him. He didn't ask for it, but I gave it to him as a way to appease him, my letter jacket that I had earned playing football. And I gave him that, and he was backing out of the car looking at me like, why was he backing down from doing what he intended to do? And long story short, as he exited the vehicle, my sister's boyfriend retrieved a machete from the back seat of the car that I was in. And then that guy and he get into it, and I watch him kill him with the machete. And it was a bad night. Let's say it.
And you're just a teenager.
14, 3 days before Christmas.
14 years old. I mean,
and right. Stu, I wish I could tell you that was just the only time something like that happened. I had there's more of those that shake me, but that one for whatever reason, it's not, like I said, not the first time I escaped being killed in my early teens, but that one just changed me. I don't know. I left that saying, you know what, I may have been born plain white trash, but I'll be damned if I die this way. This was all fun and games and cool when it was fun and games and cool, but this isn't cool anymore. Like, I want to get out of this.
So, in my mind, I'm trying to absorb all of this and realize that here's a young man who is saying, why is all this happening to me? And what have I got to live for? And what's my future going to be? And yet, you later become a member of law enforcement. You studied criminal justice and all. I mean, I'm trying to wrap my mind around, how do you go from all of this terror in your life to saying, you've only got two ways to go. You're either going to become a gangbanger and join that aspect, or you're going to try and undo the bad that's befallen you in your childhood. And somehow you get the strength, and as you say, maybe it was some divine intervention that came along and said to you, you can do better, Ricky, and you've got to do better, Ricky. And so you did, and you studied criminal justice. At where was it, at Texas State, I think?
Yes.
And then you went into law enforcement. I mean, even serving on a task force with the FBI. I mean, how does one transition their life from this past to this, current present?
I wish I could tell you that I orchestrated that, but I didn't. I remember vividly going to my high school counselor shortly after, all that. It was really in the wake of it, but I was probably about 16 at this point. And I go to him and I said, I want to go to college. I need help. Like, nobody in my family. I mean, my sister's the first person to graduate high school. Like, I don't have anybody to talk to. And he told me that I wasn't college material, even though I was a straight A student. And I was being recruited by colleges for football. And he told me that, I just wasn't the right type of person to go to college to. He judged me by the way I looked and side of tracks I lived on. So he took me off the college path, put me on a get out of school early to go work more program, because I was already working full time at about 14, 15 years old. And he he tried to railroad me. It's the easiest way to say it. And I asked him, like, well, what do I do then? Because I don't want to die in the gutter. And he said, Ricky, you should go to automotive technician school. That's about your speed. And that there's nothing wrong with that, folks. I'm not speaking negatively about that. I just knew that wasn't my path. And I left his office and I thought, I won't say what I actually said, but I basically said, you know what, F you. Didn't say it to his face, but I said, I'm going to go to college. Like, you're not going to tell me I can't. Tell me I can't and watch me do it, right? That's just how I'm wired. And I think because I operated from spite, that's why I went to college.
And wow, see, that really takes some personal commitment. When everybody really is telling you you can't do it, maybe that is the gut punch that all of us need. That when somebody says you just can't do that, you can't go there, and you say to yourself, watch me. That not only do I believe in myself that I can do it, but I have got to do it, just really to show everybody else who told me I couldn't. I did it.
I did have a chip on my shoulder. That is true.
Yeah, and on the website, which we've been scrolling across the screen, acceptingtruthfindinghope.com. There's a lot of information about Ricky, and also please feel free to reach out if you've got questions or want to connect with him, to have a session with him, even to learn how to channel your life in the right directions. But there are some statistics that I find absolutely incredible that's on the website. And one of them is regarding suicide. Mm-hmm. And I can understand somebody that has been in your position, how close that word could come to reality, given the things that you've gone through. But right there in the middle of the screen, folks, look at that statistic. 700,000 people commit suicide each year. I did the math. We're talking over 1,900 per day. That is incredible. And myself being a veteran, I know that veterans are part of that. Some of it is because of despair and depression and loneliness. And I'm sure that a lot of that, but other can be for a variety of reasons, but 1,900 people a day. And then the second line, the second bullet point you've got there, for people 15 to 29 years of age, which you were in that category, suicide is the fourth leading cause of death. And that's a statistic that I'm sure has the facts to back it up, but it's almost unbelievable, the fourth leading cause of death.
Now, that's just globally, Stu. When you bring that back to the United States, it's the third leading cause of death for that age group.
Yeah. And I know that with teenagers, very often social media plays a big part in it. Bullying plays a big part in it. Driving people to see no value in themselves. And that is another reason why Ricky, I think, decided to become a life and relationship coach, and all to help other people say you can do better, because you're not speaking from somebody that went to school and got a college degree in psychology to do this. You learned it, as they say, you're a Rhodes Scholar. What you learned on the road, and it's life that helped you get to the point where you can now share your experiences with other people. And am I correct?
Yeah, you're 100% correct. So for transparency purposes, Did I ever consider suicide? I thought about it more times than I can count. I never attempted it. Now, part of that statistic that I put on the page was that for every one person who commits it, so for all 700,000 people who do kill themselves, 25 others per one, okay, attempt it. So that's 17.5 million people a year who try to take their own life for one reason or another. And I focus on these statistics because what I want people to understand is that your adversity is not designed to take you out. Your adversity is designed to really to purify you, to get you to grow and help you to see things maybe from a different perspective than you're willing or currently able to see them. And I know that's difficult, and I know because I've looked through that lens myself.
It's interesting to me that having been an EMT and a police officer, you're a married man and a father, and you think, oh well, he found the light at the end of the tunnel, but it's like, I mean, I just see Ricky, you as being somebody that gets smacked in the face, and then you turn around and say, okay, fine. And then you turn around, turn the other cheek, and you get smacked in the other side because you finally found love. You found had your first daughter. I guess it was your first daughter was born with heart issues,
Sure.
and it's almost like, man, I've been through all this crap in my life already, and now I'm being thrown another curve, and so. How is it dealing with a sick child and what she went through?
So, it would be one thing if it was just sickness, but
Yeah,
on
it was beyond
the
that.
day she was born, they told me that, she had 4 heart defects and that she would go into congestive heart failure at 3 weeks old. And there was nothing they could do, that my daughter was going to die. She has a rare form of dwarfism as well. And so, yeah, it's bad enough that you get that news, okay? But for me, I remember standing in the NICU after she was born, and I'm looking at her, and I have my hand in the incubator thing, and her little hand grabs my finger, and man, I was a smitten kitten, And having longed for love my whole life, just wanted someone to love me. I look at this little girl, and for the first time ever, as I'm sitting there, I was like, thank you, God. I finally have somebody who's just going to love me not because of what I do, not because of who I am or anything, right? Or not love me because of what I've done in my past. She's just going to love me. I'm her daddy, right? And then this doctor comes up and was like, hey, Mr. Sluder, let me tell you all the bad news you don't know. And I already knew that she had 2 heart defects. That's why she was in NICU. But then he tells me that she has 2 additional, and there was no heart wall separating her atria or her ventricles. So she had basically a 2-chamber heart. And then a mitral valve that was leaking profusely and a membrane blocking her pulmonary vein. And they just said, all that together, the death sentence. And sorry about your bad luck. And, I had likened God to my earthly father. I thought God was really, really mad at me. And I likened my life to that as a statement of fact, because I thought, why else would God do all of these things to me if he didn't hate me? And I was striving for his affection. I was striving for his acceptance, thinking that somehow I could meritocratically, right, earn the favor of God. If I just didn't sin or didn't do or whatever, right, kept the rules the right way. And I realized later, oh, that's BS. None of that is true. He wasn't looking for that. And he wasn't doing these things to me. He was doing these things for me. And that is a big difference. But it took me a long time to realize that. And in my first marriage, it was falling apart, much because of my own behavior. I had 18 affairs that I can keep track of. I'm not proud of that, but I'm honest about it. And it, We just didn't have a good marriage. And so I went to all of the wrong things to provide myself with a soothing salve, right? And we all do it. It's part of what I call, and not just me, but I refer to it, something called the anatomy of a stronghold. And when you buy lies all your life, like I did, you will form a belief system. And I did. And that led me to behaviors and actions that act out that belief system. And I was just caught in a stronghold from a little boy into manhood.
The bright side of part of this discussion was you said that your daughter, with her heart defects, her heart issues, was given a very, very short life expectancy.
Yeah.
How old is your daughter now?
She's 16 now. And just for your audience, so y'all understand, I've now written this as a movie, Stuart. It's called A Heart for Kylie, and I'm looking for a producer. So if any of y'all are producers, call me, because I want to make this movie. But it tells the story of how God healed her and changed me in the process. But at 3 days, on the third day of her life, a heart wall grew where there was not one. It's physiologically impossible. A septum appeared between her ventricles. The membrane blocking her pulmonary vein vanished as though it had never been there. And Stuart, I took her home on Good Friday. I mean, this is stuff you can't make up. And that's when God got my attention. And I went, wait a second. I've had you in this box, and now you don't fit anymore. And then at 4 years old, she had open heart surgery to correct the other two heart defects. As a result of that open heart surgery, she ended up having 5 strokes. And the strokes destroyed her speech center, destroyed her ability to walk, to do anything except lay there.
At 4 years old.
4 years old. She was basically just going to lay there and drool on herself the rest of her life because of all the brain damage. Third day, again, she got all of her fine and gross motor skills back. 3 months later, she had the expressive language ability of a 7-year-old. 3 years later, the damage that was done to her eyes, all of a sudden she had 20/20 vision one day. God miraculously healed her 3 times. And like I said, I did not grow up in church. I had a really bad theology, but I had to sit here and look at this and have medical practitioners tell me, we can't explain any of this. None of this makes sense. And I'm like, well, it's a miracle. I know that. But again, it kept forcing me to make that box bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, because God can't be put in one.
Boy, talk about getting religion.
Big time.
Yeah, I mean, because of your past and the things that you had been through, it probably would have been hard for most people to say there is no God. Because if there was, he would not be doing this to me. But there was also that other part of the story that said, Ricky, you ain't going down like this. I'm gonna show you that persistence can pay off. And you now look at who you are today with the background that you've had, telling it in a story of a book, writing it in a screenplay for those that are interested in producing this screenplay. Reach out to Ricky, or if you know someone. It gives you what kind of a feeling for the future, for yourself, for your daughter, for your life going forward, that all these past experiences have added up to something in which to grow upon.
Stu, it took me a long time to get there, but I have hope now, and that's why I named the book Accepting Truth, Finding Hope. I didn't have hope for a number of years. And to kind of come back to the suicide thing, when I went into law enforcement, I wasn't trying to get myself killed. Okay. Subconsciously, though, I did have a hero complex. And my thinking was that I would volunteer to be the first guy in every door, because if I got shot in the face, it didn't matter. Nobody loved me. And I'd take a bullet for the guy behind me, because that's what you do, when you're a brotherhood.
Yeah.
But for me, it was on the subconscious level. It was also, then I'll die a hero. That'll be my great big FU on the way out for everybody who said that I was a fill in the blank, right? And those words were horrible spoken to me as a little boy. And I thought, you'll all have to admit you're wrong. And no, they don't have to admit anything. Okay. But that was me striving for acceptance and hoping and not knowing who I was and trying my best to meet those four needs that I spelled out earlier of acceptance, identity, security, and purpose.
Well, Ricky, you have made something of yourself, and you are a story to be shared with the public. I am in awe of who you are today, but based on what you have overcome in your past. I mean, to have suffered through post-traumatic stress, through depression, through possible suicide, to go through all those avenues that most normal people only think about or don't know anyone who has done it. But when 700,000 people commit suicide every year, and as you said, maybe 25% more, are considering it, to meet someone who has said, "I have been there and I have done that," and another word you might want to add is your fifth word is survivor.
Yeah,
it's an incredible story, and we have been sharing the website. And folks, I encourage you to visit it, to learn a little bit more about Ricky and the journey that he has taken, and also reach out to him if you would like to converse with him, if you would like to share your story with him so that he may be able to give you a direction to follow. acceptingtruthfindinghope.com. Ricky, thanks a lot for taking the time to be with me and to share your stories.
I'm so grateful that you invited me to do so. I want to share one more thing, if you don't mind.
Please.
After I publish the book, you'll see on the back of the book that, as you mentioned, I'm married, but actually I'm not anymore, because who I thought was my person, we have a son together now, and I can only explain it as like Munchausen syndrome. My son was starved near to death, hospitalized, and discovered a whole lot of stuff that was going on. Why do I share that with y'all? I don't want pity, but I'm letting you know that I'm a man who I know for certain God loves me beyond measure. But that does not mean that bad things I won't encounter them in my life. There is a plan, there is a purpose for these bad things. This adversity that you face is all designed to make you better. And if I can leave you all with one thing, if there is any reason why any of it is making you bitter, then you've got to talk to somebody. You can't let that stuff sit inside of you. It will eat you to the point that you will be a statistic. Don't let that happen. If it's not me, find somebody that you trust, that you can undo some of this internal soul level damage that'll allow you to find freedom. But don't think for 1 second that just because you do have a relationship with God, that all your bad things are going to stop. That's not the way life always turns out.
Key words, folks: acceptance, identity, security, and purpose.
These are four needs.
It's part of the book, and it's definitely a part of Ricky Sluder's life. I end my shows with a quote from Oscar Wilde: "Be yourself, because everyone else is already taken." Sure. And I think Ricky knows what that means and what that's all about. And also, thanks again for joining us for another edition of Someone You Should Know. Go out and make it a great day. And again, thank you very, very much to Ricky Sluder.
Thanks, Stu. God bless.
Someone You Should Know.